We are live. Hello, anyone who's potentially watching. Just give it a few more minutes for people to get on, and we'll kick off. Turn the camera on as well. Cool. Mark, can you still see my screen? It's gone black for me. Checking.
No, it's black.
That's black. That's good. Yeah. Let's try and fix that.
At least it's not yellow.
Yeah, yellow was fun. Tab, that one. Camera. Now you can either have my camera or the thing, not both. That's fine. We'll just have this one then, if that's the choice. Give it another couple of minutes. We'll kick off about 5 past.
Sounds good. I'm settled in. Something to drink.
Excellent.
See people joining in the channel.
YouTube chat.
Oh. Still streaming, isn't it? Click refresh on the YouTube page. It's still streaming, that's good.
I'm watching on my other device, so I don't miss anything.
Yeah. Well,
and stream looks fine.
Just refresh the live stream thing, and so I've learned that if you refresh the thing, it still streams, which is good.
A trick I found last time was to mute the YouTube tab, otherwise it's really weird.
Yes.
Well, that's why I've got it on a different device, and that device has its audio off, so I can see the chat, but I don't hear myself. I think it's quite a long delay as well.
It is. It's about 30 seconds, I think.
Well, we definitely have an audience.
We do.
So...
We have people watching.
Hi, everybody.
All right, let's get going then. I'm sorry that you can't see me. It seems that the choice on my computer is either you can see the screen or you can see me. So you'll see me in a bit while the people are talking, but for now I'll have to choose the screen. So welcome to the May Leeds PHP Meetup. Thanks everyone for joining. So today we've got Mark Taylor's going to do a talk at next about comparing database types. After that, we'll have a little 5-minute break to go and get another drink or whatever. And then at past, or after that, Lorna will start her talk, PHP and HTTP. I've got my laptop ready so I can follow along with the bits. I'll post some links in the chat when we get to that as well, people who want to follow along. And then after that, I'll open up this call for people to join on if you want to stay for a little bit of a chat afterwards. So thanks to our sponsors who make this event happen. We've got BJSS, who are a consultancy based in Leeds and other cities. Searchability, who are a recruitment agency, and Bruntwood, who usually provide us with an awesome venue for free. Sadly, they can't provide us with an awesome venue for free at the moment for obvious reasons, but thanks for them. In other news, we have a Slack instance now. If anyone wants to join that, that is the link to do so. I'll share that in the chat as well if anyone wants to sign up, so you don't have to type it out, but there'll be a bit of a delay for that, as there is. There's a few people already joined it, but feel free to do so. Get some conversation going on it. And over to Mark then for his talk.
Hi there. So I'm going to attempt to share the right screen now.
So it's either in an in-person meetup switching between laptops or on this one switching between screens. It's never not awkward. There we go, can see that.
Sorted.
I can't see you if you want to try sharing your camera.
Good point.
I'm not sure you can share both.
You can.
Oh, there you go.
You just can't on my computer.
Got it.
For whatever reason.
Guess you're special, Hugh.
Yeah, because I chose to have a Mac.
So, hi. I think a lot of you will have met me before. If not, I'm Mark. I'm a co-organizer of Leeds PHP now with Hugh, and I'm the lead architect at DealTrack, who provide a motor finance and insurance platform to car dealerships in the UK. Welcome to my talk on comparing database types. The reason I'm giving this talk is many developers have grown up using relational databases, particularly MySQL in the PHP world. And I'd like to give you an overview of the alternatives that you might not have considered. I'm going to try my best to make this unopinionated. However, of course, due to my own experience, it's led me down certain paths. When considering your future architecture, hopefully knowing the options available will help you to make the best informed choice. So we'll start with a brief history. In the 1960s, two popular data models existed. There was a network model, Guzzle, and a hierarchical model called IMS. Then in the 1970s, E.F. Codd published an important paper to propose the use of relational database model, which is the basis of what we use today effectively. He started the ball rolling, and his paper was the start of everything. In 1976, a database model called entity relationship was proposed by P. Chen. And this is largely what we use today for modeling relational data. Then in the 1980s, SQL, or SQL, or SQL, or however you want to say that, became the standard query language. I like to go with SQL just to annoy people. In the mid-1990s, the internet basically led to an exponential growth of the database industry. A lot more people started using desktop-related databases. It was no longer in the hands of the mainframe users. And basically, relational databases ruled the roost for many years. But since the 2000 kind of era, NoSQL came onto the scene. The first NoSQL database can actually be thought of as key values, which was actually in the 1970s for basic usage, but it rose in popularity somewhat from the 2000s. Also around the same time appeared graph databases, column family databases, a bit later document databases, and then more recently, time series databases. And we're going to go into more detail on these in later slides. This is a nice pie chart, which I completely borrowed from dbengines.com, which is an excellent site for comparing the various database engines out there. And the purpose of this pie chart is to just demonstrate how popular relational databases currently are. They've been on the scene for many years, and many big companies use them out of choice because they've got a lot of value. The other slice, which is divided up, is basically the NoSQL databases, apart from the strange ones like native XML database. Okay. So this is a trend starting from 2013, and the reason why I wanted to include this is just so it demonstrates the popularity of graph databases, which have come on immensely since 2014. And guess which one I'm a fan of? Yes, graph databases. More recently, however, time series databases have made a big impact on the scene. So time series databases would be used a lot in DevOps for monitoring, for example. Lots of metrics, which you would see in the likes of New Relic or Grafana, would be recorded from all the servers you're running, and you would tend to use the time series database to store those things. On to what we know, relational databases. Here's a slide that shows some common relational databases, which I'm sure a lot of you have used. Myself, particularly MySQL, a lot of PHP developers have. Done quite a bit with Postgres as well. MariaDB, if you're cool and like the fork. If you're on the Microsoft world, you've probably gone with SQL Server. And if you have a lot of money to burn, Oracle, because it's powerful but expensive. What are the pros of relational databases? So they're tried and tested, immensely reliable. They have strong consistency. They have the ACID model, so that's atomicity, consistency, isolation, and durability. And that basically means it's a guarantee for what you write to the database will exist and stay there. SQL is a standardized language, you could call it a language, and easy to get started with. Everyone tends to be familiar with it. There's an excellent range of tools and libraries available. Excellent driver support for a variety of languages. And the costs and risks are generally well understood by businesses because there's been a lot of experience with relational databases. People tend to know how they scale and how much they cost. Basically, they're just a safe bet. What are some of the cons? Speed. So in the 1970s, data storage was a premium. It cost a huge amount of money to store data. We were storing things on large tape drives, which are expensive and hard to manage. So normalization was a massive factor because the more you broke up the data, the more efficiently you could store it on the disk and the less storage space it took. But the way we break up the data in relational databases tends to have a performance impact because the more joins there are, then the slower the query, generally. Large tables tend to have poorer performance and they don't scale very well. Effectively, at some point, you're going to fill up your hard drive and then you need to either vertically scale your server, which costs a lot of money, or buy more servers and try to use replication. So you're limited to the resources of the server that you're hosting on. Partitioning doesn't tend to be common because it's a design consideration for relational databases that consistency is the core thing. Managing large amounts of data is difficult, therefore. CPU these days is really expensive. So the choice metric in the past was disk storage because that was expensive, but now storage is cheap. So it makes more sense now to optimize based on cost for storage rather than CPU. So basically costs start to increase with relational databases exponentially due to the fact you have to scale the servers you're using. Flexibility tends to be a consideration because you require a predefined schema, and that tends to be cumbersome to update. I'm sure we've all had the battles of doing live rollouts and trying to juggle updating the schema of the database with the new features you're trying to release with feature flags and the various different ways you can do that. So these are the cons of relational databases. Just a featured relational database is MySQL. It's currently the second on dbengines.com, rated below Oracle because it's expensive. Therefore, I didn't go with Oracle. Don't tell them. It's really affordable. It's got a great community behind it, excellent library and driver support, and it's open source, which is always great. So that's relational databases. On to NoSQL. So non-relational databases appeared on the scene around 2000-ish. They were designed to overcome the limitations of relational databases. They tend to be really flexible. So data is generally stored in a flexible structure, which is easily adapted. You don't need to predefine the schema. It adapts based on the data you want to store. It's highly scalable. So it's got partitioned horizontal scaling, which means as your data grows, the data is partitioned and that can be stored on various different servers. So basically, it's a lot easier to grow your data than it is on relational databases. They tend to be highly resilient. High availability is a core design factor with most NoSQL databases. So if one of the nodes goes down, you will have a node to replace it. They tend to be really fast. Due to the way that data is stored and queried, you can shape the data so that it's efficient to query. What types of NoSQL database do we have? Document. So structured data stored in documents, generally in JSON. However, there are different things. You can store in XML and you can store in YAML and things. Key value databases. So data stored in key value pairs. Graph databases, where data is structured in nodes. Nodes have edges, and nodes and edges can have properties. More on that later. Wide column databases. Related data is stored as a set of nested key value pairs in a single column. What's CAP theorem? So a choice when you're considering any database choice is distributed data systems always offer a trade-off between consistency, availability, and partition tolerance. So consistency is where each node in the cluster responds with the most up-to-date data. So if something's always consistent and you save something, you expect the data you query to be the same as what you saved. Availability. Each node returns an immediate response, even if it's not the most recent data. Partition tolerance guarantees a system will continue to operate, even if one of the nodes in the cluster fails. So basically, you can never have all three. You need to make a compromise between which one you go for. And we have a nice Venn diagram demonstrating this. So relational databases tend to be CA, which is a mix of consistency and availability. And depending on the choice you go with for NoSQL databases, you have a compromise between the other various elements. I'm just going to take DynamoDB as an example here. With DynamoDB, you can actually choose if you want to be strongly consistent or have eventual consistency based on the query you make. So you can either guarantee that your data is always going to be retrieved, irrelevant of which node it's retrieving it from, which is strongly consistent. Or you can say, just give me the most recent record, which is eventual consistency. So on to key value stores. Here are some of the examples, some of the main ones. What's the advantage of key value databases? Blazingly fast storage and retrieval, extremely scalable. They tend to be made up of 2 data items which are linked, a key and a value. The data stored is considered to be opaque to the database, so there's no structured queries, no documents, no structure to the data. They're typically used for caching, sessions, carts, things which require extremely rapid queries, but you don't need to be able to search the data effectively. There's no predefined schema. An awesome key value database, in my opinion, is Redis. So it's blazingly fast. It's got an open source license. It has many useful data structures like hashes, lists, and sets, which offer a lot more features than you do with just storing strings. It supports master-slave replication with failover. It supports transactions. It can persist the data on disk as well as just storing it in memory. And it's got a high availability offering via Redis Sentinel, which basically, as the name would imagine, watches over the cluster. And it has a product called Redis Cluster. It's got awesome client library support, so it's available for many languages. Also, its CLI tool is pretty nice, which I like to play with. You can even set up a telnet session and just connect straight to the cluster using telnet. Onto document databases. Here's some of the examples again. You may notice some of the names are familiar, and that's because certain databases support various different data stores. For example, DynamoDB supports document stores and key value stores, as does Cosmos DB. What's a document database? You store documents using the likes of JSON, XML, YAML, or BSON, which is binary JSON. It's got a really flexible database structure. So you tend to use it primarily for storing JSON documents, and if the fields in JSON adapt, you don't need to update the schema all the time like you do with relational databases. It'll just adapt to the data you're storing. It tends to be 1 row per document would be a comparison between relational. Documents can be queried, unlike key value stores. So implementations tend to provide an API where you can query documents. You can update the document partially, which is not the case with key value. So you tend to have to update the whole thing with key value, whereas with document databases, you can update part of a document. Certain implementations offer basic joins. I know that MongoDB does, and DynamoDB doesn't, as they have different opinions as to what the most efficient data design is. So horses for courses in that one. My personal favorite is DynamoDB, because I'm an AWS fanboy, and it's a good product. It's fully managed service, software service. It's particularly awesome for serverless applications. So if you're designing a serverless application using Lambda, then connecting to it with Dynamo for your database choice is a no-brainer. It's used for lots of high-performance sites like Amazon, Netflix, Lyft, and Medium. It offers single-digit millisecond latency, according to their website. You can store various different types of data in it. It supports ACID transactions, like Relational. Flexible modeling structures, so you can do the likes of one-to-many and many-to-many, etc. in Dynamo. It has flexible billing, on demand or provisioned. So on demand is basically pay as you go. The more you use it, the more you get billed, effectively. Whereas provisioned, you say, I want this many units of write capacity, and once you've used those units, then just tell people to go away. So we can control traffic rate, I guess. You don't get landed with a huge bill with provisioned. However, demand is a lot easier to work with. It offers real-time processing with DynamoDB streams. So what that means is, like in Doctrine, you get lifecycle events. With DynamoDB streams, anything that gets written to the database, you can trigger something which is like a Lambda. And the Lambda can say, index this record to Elasticsearch, for example. Or store it in an event store, if you like, that kind of thing. If you're interested in learning DynamoDB, I'd really recommend checking out a chap called Alex Debris. He does a free guide called DynamoDB Guide and a book. And there's a nice YouTube link for a deep dive, which is from the AWS re:Event. Onto graph databases. Here's some of the more popular choices. So graph databases, how do they differ? They're very much like document databases in terms of structure, but with a big focus on relationships. So they have concepts called nodes, roughly equivalent to a document. A node is basically an entity, and edges between nodes are relationships. Nodes can have properties, and the edges can have properties. When you draw the relationships for graph databases, it tends to be far more simpler and expressive than entity relationship diagrams. So it's often just circles with lines between them, and I'm going to show a slide with this in a minute. The properties are flexible, like document databases, so the data can easily be altered. There's some powerful, flexible query languages. Gremlin is a popular one for like the Apache-based products, Tinkerpop. Cypher is Neo4j, which is really nice to work with. Relationships should basically be first-class citizens. So what I mean by that is, instead of all the extra tables you would do in a relational database, all the many-to-many joins, etc., you tend to design those after the fact, whereas relationships are always a primary concern with graph databases. And because they're a primary concern, graph traversal is really fast. You greatly simplify the schema, and queries are faster to do. It's useful for highly connected data, for example, Facebook. Friends are friends, friends are friends are friends. And this is an example. So the circles are what we call nodes, and the edges between them are relationships. So the Louvre is a museum. As you can see, it's very simple to draw them and design things as a business. My personal favorite, Neo4j, because it's got an awesome Cypher query language. It's really easy to get started with. I've tried various graph databases, and I think the community is just really great with Neo4j. Lots of learning resources. It's easy to learn. It's got an open source community version. They do offer an enterprise version, which is not cheap, but good. So that offers clustering and high availability. So if you want to scale as a business, you tend to want to go with the enterprise version. They offer ACID compliance. They've got really strong direct driver support and an immensely useful query browser, which I'm going to demo next. The query browser is basically built into Neo4j, and it allows you to run queries and visualize the data as you're running it. Column family databases. A column family is like a table in a relational database. They're immensely high performance and highly scalable. They're really good at data compression and partitioning, and are often used for big data, Internet of Things, due to the fast inserts and query speeds. And they're used by Spotify in order to store user profile attributes, artists and songs, as an example. This tends to be how data is stored in column family databases. So you have a row key and then column keys. I'm aware I'm short on time, so I'm going faster now. NoSQL, time series databases is the last one. So time series databases are optimized basically for processing time-based data. So as I mentioned right at the start, if you're recording lots of metrics as a DevOps, you tend to store those in a time series database. A really good example is New Relic. They were traditionally used for the stock market and recording things like sensor monitoring for Internet of Things. They're really good for querying data in a time-based way, as they automatically aggregate the data, so it's easy to query. And that's a lot. Thanks a lot.
Cool. Cheers, Mark. I think we'll take a little 5-minute break now. So if anyone wants to go and get a drink, now's the time to do it. And then we'll get going with Lorna's talk afterwards. While we're in the break, actually, I'll post the notes for Lorna's talk, which have some links on it, which are useful if you're following along.
Yeah, I'm hoping a bunch of you are following along. And also that you know where the chat is.
Yeah.
It was a little bit quiet in Mark's talk. So you should all know that there is chat. There are people chatting. And I do need you to pay attention. So grab your laptops.
Got my trusty ThinkPad here to follow along with your talk. The notes are in the Meetup as a comment, but I will also post them on the YouTube chat right now. Oh, it's formatted them horribly. Brilliant.
Don't worry. I don't think this technology thing will catch on.
No.
I'm really loving the remote working at the moment in lockdown. Less traveling is good.
I was going to say, is that sarcasm? I can't tell.
No, I really do like it.
I've always worked from home, so that gave me a great advantage because I already have the good chair and the second monitor and everything. So
yeah, I used to do a few days a week at home and a few days in the office, so I've just had less traveling to Leeds now.
Also fortunate to have quite a good home office setup.
I like that it's effectively repairing the environment because no one's using the roads anymore. Effectively, it's reducing all the smog in the cities, and I'm sure the trees are loving it.
What I'm going to do, actually, I'm going to post a link to the Meetup event in the chat, and that has a comment with all the things on it, rather than reformat them all. That's a better option, because it won't let me put line spaces in the comments.
Okay, so everybody click on this link.
Yeah, click on the link
in the chat, open it in the tab, just in case you want to click on any of the resources that I'm going to mention. There are no slides, so this is your opportunity.
In a way, I actually miss my commute to work because I used to cycle in. So that's kind of my bit of exercise, and I'm actually having to actually make myself go out of the house rather than having to do it every day to get to work.
It'd take me a couple of hours to cycle to Leeds.
I'm not sure I could from here.
Well, I'm quite close, so it's only about 20 minutes.
50 odd miles from where I live.
Yeah, I'm closer than that. I'll be back in a minute and then we'll kick off again.
Sorry to be simple, but where are these resources linked from, Lorna?
If you click on the Meetup itself, which is linked in the YouTube chat, then I believe the resources are in a comment. I didn't actually click because I've got them all open in tabs already. Blank silence says you didn't find them. Let's have a look.
Can't see any comments.
We can complain to Hugh when he gets back with more beer. Also hope my keyboard's not too antisocially loud. Like I know that it is. And I can't fix it.
We can always post it on
best.
Slack and YouTube as backups.
I left my second best keyboard in the office that I sometimes use in Huddersfield before lockdown. So
I actually went back into work to get my keyboard.
I'm quite tempted. I do have a key fob, so I can get in. Yeah. Hugh, where am I finding these links?
The links are in a comment.
Find them.
I'm going to post it again.
Any comments, Hugh?
I just can't find a comment. I think it's
it's
I'm scrolling down. I can see comments.
There should be one for me, which is
isn't one.
The link to the meetup. I'll post it again. Then I'll double check it's there.
Post the link and then check. That's definitely the right way around to do it. Let's do that. We're such pros. Also, I have YouTube open on a different device, so.
Okay, so I've posted a link to the meetup event for this. And if you scroll down to the comments, that's not there. That's helpful.
Yeah, maybe post it on YouTube.
Yeah. Well, it's too long. That's the problem.
Well, you can try and guess when you should post each item.
Yeah, I'll post them as individual things, actually. That's going to be the best way to do it.
You can be my glamorous assistant and put links in the chat.
I'm not very good with technology.
Don't worry. Like I say, I don't think it's going to catch on.
No.
This tech thing there.
Okay, here's a stream of comments. One of these is a link.
This is a wall of links.
This is the last one.
You've all seen them once. Please click on the first one and then share them back with each other on an on-demand basis. We'll let the chat self-govern. It's fine.
Yep, keep chatting on the chat. We'll be watching it. Any questions or anything?
Yeah, I'm attempting to watch the chat at the same time as talk. So it's always good to know that anyone's still alive or something.
Get my laptop ready so I can follow along.
Well, I'm on the slide to event, so that's a good start.
Excellent.
Okay, I guess kick off when you're ready then, Lorna.
What an introduction. I certainly will. This is also greatly amusing that I can come back and watch you trying to do the live code stuff at any time. So, no pressure. Fantastic. Let me figure out how to make myself a screen share. Oh, I think I was sharing and that's why my screen was weird. Okay. This should hopefully be just me.
Yes.
Excellent, cool. I think I've got all the pieces where I need them, but we'll find out as we go along. So I will start by introducing myself. Hi, I'm Lorna. I have been doing PHP and HTTP type things for much longer than we're going to talk about in a recorded video, but we can chat later. So I have been doing this for a long time. I don't only write PHP anymore. And that's a disclaimer because as soon as you see me write PHP, you'll wonder what this person is doing here. My PHP is just all over the place because I write a bunch of different languages now. And I'm like, this is the one with the semicolons. I remember. I know we have people joining from all over the place today, and perhaps you can chat in the chat and mention in the chat where you are, where you're from, if you're a PHP Leeds regular, or if you're just taking the opportunity of the digital version of our events to join us. Either way, I think it's super cool. I am going to claim that PHP Leeds is my local user group. I actually don't live in Leeds anymore. I've moved all the way to Huddersfield, which is still pretty local. And I have been a member of PHP Leeds really since the beginning, on and off. I was already active in the PHP world and running PHP Northwest when PHP Leeds was founded. I was at a PHP conference in the States, so I was in the wrong time zone when I woke up to hear, oh, you need Lorna Jane. Do you? For what? Somebody starting a PHP Leeds user group. It makes me incredibly happy that this group is still here despite everything. So if you have, okay, so I see answers coming in on the chat. We have people from Sheffield, which is pretty local. Skipton, yeah, that is too far to cycle. A bunch of Leeds people, pleased about that. But I'm also seeing Berlin, London. So cool. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. I think this is nice. So the very first link that I shared today is for Slido, which is a polling software. So I'm going to do a couple of polls as we go through because I can't look at you. And to find out who you are, what you like, and what kind of what we're doing, how it's going for you. So we've got a few people, or a few people already clicked. That's cool. I just switched over to it. A few people already clicked. The first question is about whether you would consider coding along with me tonight. I think it's a really good way to learn a new thing, to do it. Now, typically, this is a bit tricky at a user group. Maybe your battery might be flat at the end of the day. That's either you or your laptop. We might not have power for everybody. We don't usually have tables. This stuff's really hard, but we're all at home. Everything's really different. And maybe different is an opportunity, just like having people join us from all sorts of different places that we would not usually have. So I think this is an opportunity for us to do something together and for us to learn something together. Now, some of you will have seen this before. Some of you will never have seen anything like it. Most of you are somewhere in the middle. But I want this to be interactive. I want you to participate as much or as little as you want. If you want to sit in your chair with a beer, that's up to you. But I really think that the people who get the most from this are the people who participate the most. Cool. So I want to talk today about Guzzle and about SDKs. Guzzle is a PHP HTTP client. SDKs are software development kits that make it easier to make API calls from PHP. But before I get too deep into the PHP end of things, I want to look more closely at the APIs and what calling them means and how that sort of fits in with our day-to-day work. So I'm going to start with a website that you might have heard of. Has anyone used GitHub? I see a sea of hands in my imagination. Awesome. So if you go and check out the link to the GitHub docs, you'll see it here. We're going to use the V3 API today. That's their REST API. And I'm on the overview page. So while I'm here, I want to check out a couple of things about this API that I need to know before I go ahead and call it. So let's have a quick look. Here are the important things. So we're going to make requests to api.github.com. That's the root of our API calls. Excellent. So that's a really important thing that we need to know. The other thing that I want to just look up while I'm here is pagination. Because I am not a machine, I'm going to have my font size really big to show you what's happening. So I don't want all the data. It looks like I can just append per underscore page to get fewer results. So that's also very useful. One reason that I picked GitHub as an example that I want us to all make an API call today is because its docs are great. And for me, that's the most important thing about your API. If you have the best API in the world and no documentation or terrible documentation, you might as well not have built the API at all for all the use it is to anybody else. So I chose the GitHub API. Small spoiler, we're about to make a request with Postman. So if you don't already have Postman installed, then postman.com, just install it really quickly. Okay, good. Let's get a list of repositories. Now, another reason that I picked the GitHub API today is that you don't need to be authenticated for a very small number of API calls to get public data, which means it's super simple to demo and I'm less likely to get things wrong when I try and show you what happens. So there's that. I am scrolling down, looking at the right-hand bar here, and I'm not sure if this is big enough. You should let me know in the chat if anything needs to be bigger. I'm also aware some of you are probably watching on your phones. So I am going to get a list of repositories, specifically a list of my repositories. So list public repositories for the specified user. I need users, the username, and then the repos. Great, we're all set. I just mentioned Postman. This is a very friendly graphical HTTP client. If you know me really well, you know that I have curl tendencies, and that's, I've been doing this a long time, and that's my go-to tool. But Postman is amazing for lots of reasons. It's also really good at allowing you to save requests, tweak them a little bit, put in pre-saved environment variables for your authentication and that kind of thing. So I actually do use it quite a bit, and it's an ideal client. It's not the only option. So if you're on Mac, check out Pour. If you don't like Postman, try something called Insomnia. Depending what your IDE is, that may also have an HTTP client in it. Please share your favorite HTTP clients in the chat, and I will go ahead and make an API call. Can you share your HTTP clients in the chat while making an API call along with me? Okay, let's try and do all of this together. So here's Postman, and I'm going to make a new request. Now then, this is api.github.com. I can't type, which is always what happens if you're trying to live demo. api.github.com, and it is users, my nick. Oh, it's auto completing. Can anyone tell that I rehearsed? And we're going to put that per page parameter on the end as well. Fantastic. Good. If I send a request, Postman gets the response, and then it formats the JSON for me, which is kind of amazing. Rob, you're very welcome to use curl instead if you prefer. Note, if you are using curl, you just watched my response, and I'm not sure how clear the YouTube video is, but I saw a wall of text arrive, and then Postman went, oh, this is JSON. And it did this pretty print for me. If you work with curl, you need to do pretty print yourself, and I'd recommend a little command line utility called JQ. Someone can post the link in the chat for JQ. I'd recommend JQ to go with that. It does this kind of pretty print, but on the command line. So if you are working with standard in, standard out, and JSON, that can be super useful. I'm already on a tangent. We've made one API call. Come on. Okay, good. Curl, yeah, you can do curl. That's completely fine. Now then, let's have a look at this. We've got a bunch of data in our response, and if I if you look at it, you can see it's mostly links. And if I scroll down, I'm looking for, oh, I thought I found it. I'm looking for the end of the first object and the start of the second one. And it's here. So we have 101 lines of response. Doesn't the per page need a, let's send it per page 3. That was quicker. I think I got a smaller response. Thanks, Mark. Okay. Okay, so I'm looking for, all of this belongs to a single repo, and there's where the one object ends and the next one starts. 100 lines of response for each repository in this results set. So cool. Yay, we made an API call. Well done. That's a nice start. How about if we want to just extend this a little bit? Well, I noticed when I was looking at the docs that we can get the new visibility parameter. Now, if you use GitHub a lot, you might have seen this. We've always had public and private repositories, and now we have like internal and something else. So we can get that information in this data set, but it's not there by default. We have to send a specific media type. So we're going to send this in our accept header. So it's here in the docs. I'm going to copy this. Postman makes this easy. If I go and look at, scroll up a little bit, it's under headers. Now I've clicked this little eye here to show me the headers it's already sending, but I think if you just put it in, it would overwrite it anyway. Sending one extra field. Let's see if we get the visibility in our response. So we've still got a huge response. And if you look here, it's right near the end. Then you get the visibility back as well. So sending headers is quite easy with Postman. And it's something that comes up a lot, not just for the media types, although you may well have to send accept headers, but also for authentication and all kinds of other special headers. But this is how you do it with Postman. You click the headers, change what you send. Magic. One thing I want to comment on about this is how verbose this result set is. There's 100 lines for a single repository. And if you look at it, there's really only the owner here, all the information about me and links to me that is actually nested. Everything else is just a link. So there's lots and lots of hypermedia here. Hypermedia, links, but we use a big word when we talk about APIs. Awesome. Yes, there's lots and lots of hypermedia here leading me to other resources. I can follow this link through and see a list of the stargazers or the history, the list of commits, and that kind of thing. The only other thing that's listed that's nested is sometimes if it's a known license, that's sometimes nested too. And that's intentional, right? This API is intended for a machine to read it. And the way that you design your APIs it's a trade-off between including so much information that the thing receiving it can't understand it without filling up its memory and falling over, or just not sending enough information. If I asked for a list of repositories and it sent me only a list of links to repositories, I would have to hit each one of those links to be able to display the list of repositories, which was after all the point. So that trade-off between how much information is here and how much you have to fetch separately depends a lot on the use cases, but you will often see very verbose and/or lots of links like this. Excellent. If you have questions, I hope you know you should have already typed them in the chat. I think the question, so start now, go fast. I think the question that I normally get asked when I show this kind of thing is, if GitHub has a v4 API, why are we using the v3 one? It's a really good question. And I just wanted to call it out because if you just go to the GitHub APIs page, you'll see both. The v4 API is GraphQL, so it's a really different interface than the RESTful APIs, the more HTTP-ish APIs that you might be familiar with and that I really wanted to cover today. The v4 API is amazing, powerful, lots of fun. I do use it. It's a whole separate talk. So if you want to see that talk, then ask Hugh and we'll find someone to give it. But it's not today's talk. So I will try not to give the talk. Excellent. So this is enough of this. Let's write some PHP. Now, I don't want to alarm you, but I write PHP. Well, I don't normally, but today I'm writing PHP in a very blank page kind of a way. I'm going to open a file with a .php extension and I'm going to run it from the command line. And that's so that we don't bring any framework baggage or any extra moving parts with us, no matter what kind of PHP you write, what framework you use. I know we have a bunch of crossover with the Drupal, WordPress communities, probably other people that I haven't mentioned. This will work in your context. And that's the point that I'm trying to make. So we're going to use Guzzle. Somewhere, the Guzzle docs are available. Click on your list of links. Here's the Guzzle documentation. Now, I love Guzzle. It's a really nice, very powerful, but not too complicated wrapper. Also, whenever I look up how to do a thing, it always can do the thing, which I think is amazing. It's so fully featured, but it doesn't feel complicated. Anyway, the docs are great, and we're going to go ahead and use them. So it says I can install it by requiring Guzzle HTTP Guzzle. So let's do that, shall we? I'm going to start with, find this terminal, but I can see it. I just can't. There we are. Is this big enough font? Hopefully, let's make a directory for this. Composer. What dependency manager is this? We need require Guzzle HTTP. It's just called Guzzle. See what happens. Cool. So while Composer gets its act together, we can scroll down a little bit and have another look at the code. It's here in Quick Start. Here we are. Create a client. Do things with the client is basically the short version. So somewhere there's a gist. Hopefully someone's going to paste the gist into chat as well. There's a gist. Here's one I made earlier because I didn't want you to have to watch me type this. So I'm just going to grab the contents of this gist as my starting point. If you're playing along at home, and I hope that you are, then cool. This will also help you because you don't have to try and type as I come out and come into the next one. I'm also going to switch the poll over so you can visit Slido again and let me know how this is going for you. Try and figure out who is still alive, still with me, and so on. This link pasting service is excellent. I see it's already there. So grab the gist. Composer installed me something. We're cooking on gas here. I'm going to create a file called index.php, and all I need is the gist that I printed. Now, I didn't type all this, but it doesn't mean that you get away with not seeing it all. I can see that it's also not laid out brilliantly here. So I'm just, hooray, PHP doesn't care about white space. I shall just put some terrible terrible white space in to make this fit on the screen. Excellent, well done. Line 3, this should look familiar. We are requiring the autoloader. So Composer writes this file. It's got all the instructions on how to find all the things, and we require it at the top of our entry point. This is index.php. Now the good part, Guzzle, we're creating a client. Nothing else happens here. We just create a client. We don't need to set the base URI. We might use our client to call all different URLs on different endpoints, different domains. I've just set the base URI here to try to make the rest of my code shorter because I only need to put half the URL in each of those two places, if you follow that logic. Next, I have a try catch. Now, you need a try catch around any requests that you make from Guzzle, because they can fail, and if they do, they throw exceptions. I think Guzzle's exception handling is an example to the rest of the industry. I wish all PHP libraries were as sane as Guzzle at exception handling. So you need to try catch, because if something goes wrong, if I get a 400 or a 500 type response, then it'll end up in the catch block with a client exception or a server exception, whatever. So line 9, we're making a GET request. Still not seeing any questions, so I'm just going to keep going. Line 9, we're making a GET request. This is the same request that you just saw me make in Postman. Now, we get a response, and then we start to look at what we got back. Always check your status code. Always check your status code. Because if anything unexpected happened here, if I didn't get a 200 response, okay, if it's an actual error, Guzzle will catch it. But if I get some other kind of unexpected response, I'm immediately then not going to be able to unserialize the JSON, because it probably doesn't have JSON in the response. Always check your status code response. Now, we do response get body, and that gives us the body, but it's a stream. If you echo this, you can get it as debug output, yes, but it's not actually a string. Now, PHP is amazing. Streams are a feature. We don't know how big an HTTP response is going to be, right? I actually do, obviously, because it's 30 repos and it's 100 lines per repo, so it's only going to be however big that is. It's not very big in the grand scheme of things. But if you're dealing with binary data, very large responses, potentially large responses, user-supplied uploads, those kinds of things, you don't want to load that into memory. It's fine on my laptop, reasonably powerful, only running single-threaded PHP. I mean, not until I run the command. On a web server, loading too much stuff into memory is doom. It's when your wait time graphs turn into hockey sticks and the world ends. So we always handle with streams, and that means that we can handle them a piece at a time. You've probably seen this in file handling code, where we do fopen and then some kind of a loop to get all the pieces. This is the same theory. Because I know it isn't very big, then I ignore all of my own advice and immediately cast it to a string on line 13. You should do as I say, and not as you saw me do, in a single 20-line file and a large font size. That's my story. Cool. So we make a request, we get a response, we check for the 200 status code, we get the body, we cast that to a string, and we JSON decode it. That second argument to JSON decode is to make it into an array rather than a whole load of standard class objects. I think this makes more sense. All I'm going to do is print it, because the point was really the request and the response, not whatever we might do next. So hopefully that was enough chat to let you keep up and get your code where you want it to be. And now I'm going to run my code. I didn't set the per page limit in. So we've got different. Oh, this is from when I was a CouchDB contributor. Is at the end of page 1. But you can immediately see I get more or less the data that we've seen before. It looks like we'd expect. And because I'm doing a print R on it, I can see how the data looks, the structure, and how I would access that in array notation if I wanted to. So let me just check that I got everything. I did say that streams were awesome. Yes, I wrote myself a note. Cool. So when we did it in Postman, I showed you how easy it was to add the header. So I think we should do that now as well, because again, Guzzle makes this stuff really, really approachable. So back to my code. And this was making me nervous. This is not how I Guzzle, right? You create the request, you craft the request, and then you send it. It has this shortcut, client get, client post, whatever, which is cool. And you can pass the options either when you create the client or here into the get. But I don't know, I'm often working with quite complicated requests, and I really like to build all the bits of the request and then sort of dispatch it. So that's what we'll do to add the header to make it really readable. So we'll start by creating a request. Now, You'll notice I haven't done any namespacing on this. Basically, so if you copy and paste this code around, it should all still work in any context. I'm creating a new PSR7 request. If you work with PHP, APIs, HTTP, you'll see this PSR7 thing come past. It's a standard that's from the PHP Fig. So anyone who's still awake and listening, I'd like a woot in chat, please, for the PHP Fig. They sort out all our standards, and it stands for Framework Interoperability Group. And I have been doing this long enough to remember when the frameworks did not interoperate. So woot, PHP Fig. Thank you for the work that you do, and especially for PSR7, which standardized the description on the HTTP request and response messages. If you look inside the standard, it's literally just interfaces, but it's changed everything. Right. So far, I've written a class name. Let's keep going. So I'm going to make a GET request, and my GET request is going to be to, I can tell that I'm going to run out of space. Let's just stick this on a new line, and I'll sort out the layout in a minute. My GET request is going to be to users, that URL that was above, basically. I'm going to remember to put the per page in this time. Per page. Let's stick with 3. It's a single quote. This is a semicolons language. Got it? Yep, we're winning. So now I'm going to declare some options. And this is where the magic happens, really, in Guzzle. There's a bunch of things that you can declare here. You're watching me set headers, but if you need to send form fields, that's not how you spell accept, Lorna. If you need to send form fields or JSON data, custom headers, auth content, often that's headers as well. Build up any kind of array of data to send. All of that config, you could put it here. In the opts array that I'm about to feed in when I create the response by sending the request. Now, this is probably still in my copy paste. Who knows what else is in my copy paste buffer? This is probably not something I should broadcast, but there we go. I did. Never mind. We've got a header, still a curly bracket language. Excellent. And cool. So we've made this request. I've prepared some options. Now let's tie those two things together with the client that we defined right at the top and send the lot. So this time I'm making a response which is made of client. That's not how you spell client. Client send this request that I made and the opts that I set up as well. So at this point, I've got an exact replacement. Lines 10 to 18 are an exact replacement for line 9, but I've got my options. I've set my header. I could set a bunch of other stuff here if I wanted to. So that is all ready to go. Oh, I've got lots of results on the poll as well. I've inspired someone to install Postman. I feel like we're doing some good in the world today, everybody. Okay. And on the chat, I'm also seeing some votes for PSR 8. Yeah, not in quarantine, I'm afraid. And some stories of having Guzzle 1 and 5 in the same code base. Yeah, I'm still making fun of the maintainers for their several consecutive mishaps on major version releases. They jumped the gun with one of the PSRs and had to do 2 major version releases really close together quite soon after another major version release for another really good reason. Like, they're all completely good reasons, but it means that the Guzzle version numbers went from 3 to 6 in a really short space of time. They're all good versions. We've been pretty stable on 6 for a while now, and I'm happy about that. I am going to prove to myself that my code works by running it. And here we are. We've got some more outputs. You've got the extra visibility field here in the response too, because I sent the extra header. So that's all coming together. And you've seen a really good, if I just put the code back on for a second, you've seen a really good example there of how to work with Guzzle. And I guess some of you might be new to Guzzle, some of you probably aren't, or you're using it in, it's already wrapped up in your frameworks. So it's familiar, but it's not. You don't know that it's called Guzzle. So let's move on then and talk a little bit about the frameworks and about the contexts that you normally work in, because I think that's cool and amazing. So I've just put, this is the last poll. Now, I've tried to take a guess at which PHP frameworks we probably use as a community, and I've put a short list in my poll. If I missed you, please tell me in chat. And if you know how your HTTP client works, then tell me that as well. Yeah, so come over to the poll and let's get a little take on everybody's frameworks. I think you can see the results, and if not, I can tell you what's happening. I think it's really important to think about how we make HTTP calls. A lot of the time, we have access to Guzzle, but we either don't know that we do, or our framework has different conventions. And I know I use an amazing thing that is not a framework, people, also in chat probably, because the user group has such a good attendance and such a nice, diverse community. There is a lack of shouting in the chat. So, excellent. So frameworks I'm getting some results for then. We've got quite a lot of votes for Symfony. Now, Symfony is an interesting one. We had a post recently on the Nextmo blog about doing 2FA on login for Symfony. It's a great framework. I feel like it's been around a long time, but actually that's fine in a good way. It's been around a long time. Now, Symfony has its own HTTP client component, and lots of other webby tools in the ecosystem depend on Symfony's HTTP client. It's been around a long time, although of course it's improved and evolved a lot. Now, I think the HTTP client for Symfony is awesome, and it's also it's HTTP plug compatible. Now, in the PHP space, HTTP plug is a set of standards describing the way an HTTP client works. And the idea is that you should be able to plug in one client or another client. The Nextmo PHP library has this. By default, we'll install Guzzle for you and use that. But if you have another HTTP plug compatible client already set up, you can give us that when you create the constructor and when you first instantiate the client connection within the Nextmo PHP library, and you can use that. So it's incredibly flexible where libraries have gone to support this standard. So Symfony's HTTP client does support it. That is fantastic. Yay. I'm also getting shouts for some Drupal, yes. And Drupal people, if you want to tell me HTTP stories, Guzzle stories in the chat, that'd be amazing because it's familiar with. For Laravel has its own HTTP client, and this is a relatively new feature in Laravel. If you look closely at it, I'm trying to be polite and I'm just really struggling. HTTP client in Laravel wraps Guzzle, changes the interface completely, fences off some of the features that you might want, and you have no idea it's called Guzzle. I don't like it because I feel like Guzzle's more powerful. I think as a developer, it can mean that you don't realize what a transferable skill you have if you take a job at another place, which actually uses the same stuff, but you've learned a limited version of it. So yeah, Guzzle has all kinds of weird and esoteric features that you wouldn't want to write a wrapper for, but which you might need. So Hugh is saying in chat, that is very Laravel. Yeah, yes, it is. That said, Laravel, we know it's popular. I really like it, actually, for some things, some very small number of things. Nextmo has integration with Laravel. If you use the notification channels stuff, we have an integration for that. I will paste I have a coupon for you to use on your Nextmo account. In fact, I'll just paste it in chat while I'm thinking about it. I wonder if that's still in my copy paste buffer. That would be amazing. Oh my gosh. So this thing that I've just pasted in chat with no words is a Nexmo coupon. So if you have a Nexmo login, or if you want to want to sign up and try it, because I'm about to do a Nexmo thing, then apply the coupon. It works on existing accounts as well. So please help yourself. Right. So we've done Laravel. We've done Symfony. What else did you all vote for? I've got, so there's some Laminas, which is the framework formerly known as Zen Framework. Now, from Laminas, I probably would use Guzzle. It's a very open-minded and pragmatic framework. It does have Diacteros, which you've probably seen as a dependency in other projects that you use, but that's fairly low level. So I probably would still use Guzzle in that setting. Also, Slim PHP, I saw mentioned in chat. Oh, because Rob's here, right? Yeah. So, hi, Rob. Slim PHP mentioned in chat. Slim doesn't have its own HTTP component. It actively encourages you to use Guzzle. And I think that's probably the right thing in most cases. Now, if you're working in a framework, especially in an established project, they're already using the frameworky way to do a thing, then, you know, always try and fit in with what is already there. But I think if you can use Guzzle, or if you have any advanced usage needs, then always come out to Guzzle, and you should always be able to come out to Guzzle. So if there's any limitations on that, then we need to talk. Like that's a real problem. Cool. So now I've said how amazing Guzzle is, I'm going to suggest that Rob's saying use Guzzle with Laminas, Metzio. That's the micro framework for Laminas, right? And Zen framework. Yes, just use Guzzle. I think that's my message. So having said how amazing Guzzle is, I'm going to go straight on and show you something else. So if Guzzle is so great, why would we need anything else? Why would we want to use something else? Well, I'm going to talk about SDKs. Now, SDKs, software development kits, are ready-made libraries that you can just install into your project, usually with Composer, and immediately get going. Now, an SDK should be a quality of life improvement. It should be a better developer experience. They have lots of advantages. You can install it. You get your IDE will be available. We'll be aware of it, so you should get some auto completion, some parameter hints. Can make it easier than having to look up API reference documentation all the time. Also, an SDK will normally have some helper features. So it'll have, it'll handle the auth token generation for you. Or, for example, the Nexmo PHP library, all the Nexmo libraries will check the message signatures for you. You don't need the library. We have a fully documented way of doing it. It's just your life's too short. Presumably you have other things to do. I normally say we could get finished and all go to the pub, but maybe next year, right? So let's pick an SDK that does the GitHub stuff we've already seen and see how it compares. Now, I do call GitHub from PHP, but I always just use Guzzle. So I haven't really used an SDK. I had a look around. KNP Labs published one. Well, that's good news because I think they're great. So I thought we could give that a try. And if you're playing along at home, you can give it a try too. So let's go back to the screen share and take a look at what we have here. So this is, let me turn on my font size a bit. Here we go. This is the KNP Labs PHP GitHub API. Alarmingly, there's new commits since I last used it, but KNP Labs know what they're doing. They probably didn't break anything. And if I scroll down, then there's some Composer installation instructions. So Composer require, all that stuff. Notice that they suggest, you can't read that now, I've highlighted it. They recommend installing their library and the Guzzle 6 adapter. So that's the HTTP plug compatible client. And they've got a whole piece about it and the docs make sense. So I'm going to take that command, find where my focus went. Here it is. Good. I'm going to take that command. I'm going to start a new directory called nplab. Is probably not the right name for it. And I'm going to run that composer command. So while composer works itself out, yeah, the link to the SDK has just popped up in chat. Hugh, you're doing an amazing job. I think I'm going to have you as my assistant on every talk I give now. This is just incredibly easy from my point of view. The basic usage gets a list of repositories. Okay, yeah, I'm on board with that. So I'm going to copy the basic usage from their README. Let's stick it in a file called index.php and have a look at what we've got. They also include the autoloader from Composer. So we've run the Composer install. We include the autoloader. Then all we need to do is create a GitHub client and then ask it to get the user repositories for this user. And I'm going to put my own username in there because I want my repositories. This is lovely, but it's not going to do anything unless we do something with that repositories command. So just keeping things super simple, I am going to print the report. Oh, I see. A link got trimmed. Okay, so try the second one of those two links if you're following chat. I'm going to print the repositories variable here. Hopefully it will have some repositories in it, but I need to add something so I can actually see what my script is doing. So let's give that a try. Oh yeah, this looks good. Fantastic. Now, you've seen GitHub data, so let's not worry too much about that. Let's just go back and have a look. This was incredibly straightforward. I didn't have to go and read the GitHub documentation. I didn't have to go and look at how to structure the URL to get a list of repositories. I just went, client, give me repositories, dump the answer. And although it was quicker because I wanted the example which was top on their README, presumably the docs are also quite good and I could do other stuff here as well. So that's a really prime example of how quick, or how, not quick exactly, but like smooth, how well-oiled your example can be when you work with an SDK. I've got a little bit of time, so I'm going to do one more example. Some of you know, work at Nexmo. We do communications APIs. And my challenge is, how quickly can you send an SMS? Well, hopefully you already have Nexmo accounts because you probably see me do this once or twice. If you don't, then the link for the sign up is hopefully arriving in chat. Go here, dashboard.nexmo.com/sign up, and get an account or sign in if you have one. Either way, you can apply the coupon code that I put in chat about 10 minutes ago. Once you've got that, log in, pick up your API key and secret. Oh, I wonder if my API key and secret are in my... I'll think on that one. I might have to drag this window somewhere. Excellent. I wonder if my key and secret are in my copy-paste buffer. Yeah, I think they will be. If you are a massive groupie, then you saw me screen share my key and secret on my Twitch stream last week. So I had to rotate all my secrets. So some things are logged in and some things are not. Which is, look, that's why we use secrets and that's why we rotate them. It's kind of no big deal and kind of annoying. Okay, so quickly sign up for an account if you don't have one. This says, Lorna, type this command to get your environment variables. Oh, that was... cool. That was easy. Okay. This is why we practice. Okay, so I've got a Nexmo directory, and I'm going to go and check out the README for the PHP client. Here it is, and I need to do, looks like composer require Nexmo/client. So let's kick that off and let it start. A repeat of the coupon code is in chat if you want to grab that and add it. Now, there's some usage instructions. We're going to need to include the autoloader, and we're going to need to instantiate a client with your key and secret. Now, mine are in environment variables. So I'm going to index.php. We're going to require vendor autoload, as we always do. So this picks up the composer files. Then I'm going to paste that client line, which goes totally behind my camera. So let's just do some white space crime to make this work. Okay. And I've got these in environment variables. So one is Nexmo API key, and the other one is Nexmo API secret. Rob is laughing about the joys of handling keys when demoing, or in my case, Rob not handling keys. You probably didn't see the stream, but I very carefully prepared this environment script that would set it for me. And then my co-presenter, who seems to share his secrets every week, asked me what to do. So I showed him my script and we set up his script. But what I didn't do was then close the file before I started screen sharing. So all that happened was I went live on Twitch, started screen sharing, and my keys were on screen. So it was like very nearly really well prepared, and not, yes, not quite. Anyway, this also works across, I just need to set it once, and then all of my test scripts across all of the different languages that I deal with. We do 6.5 client libraries, and I'm responsible for the half. So I write a lot of Golang as well as PHP, Node, Python on a week-by-week basis. So just calling them all the same thing and having them in the same environment variables is working wonders for me. And it's also been less to update now that I've rotated my secrets. So not that much stuff has stopped working. I've distracted myself. Good. Let's send a text. Here is the sending a message example. And I'm going to grab that, put it in my code. I'll be fascinated to know who can keep up with this, and start sending messages. So this is, right, the thing is, if you work for a telephony company, there's no way of not publishing your phone number. And I can type it at the same time as talking. If I get that insert mode correct. So this is my burner phone that I regularly also rotate the phone number of for all the same reasons. Good. Now, if you are in the UK, you can type whatever you like here. If you are not in the UK and you live in a country which has regulations and rules about what you're allowed to do with SMS, then you probably need to set something else here. The safest option is to buy a number from Nexmo and set that as your from, because then we can verify that you own the number. Lots of countries only allow people, anybody, to send texts from numbers that they own, which would be polite, but the UK does not have rules about that. Right, and I've got a text message. So let's find out if any of that's going to work on the first attempt. Not at all. Bad credentials. Uncaught Nexmo client exception. Okay, so I'm going to fix that by opening a terminal, another terminal, a different one, this one. I'm putting it on a different desktop. There we go. And editing it quickly. If you have, I guess, questions about how I'm handling my environment or anything like that, then this is also a good time to ask that. Of course, my clipboard's going to come up on my main screen. Let me think about that for a second. There we go. Let's put this here. Put the new value in. Source it again. Note that you need to source this kind of thing so that it's in. Right. Would have been even cooler if I had wrapped that in a try catch, but again, do as I say, not as I do. Well, it seems happy. So let's see what happens. Uh-huh. Oh, PHP Leeds, you've sent me a text to say coding is fun. And that kind of sums up why I like SDKs, because it's incredibly quick to get going and get started. And there can be a bunch of helper function. I don't need any help to send an SMS. That stuff's easy. But for some of the newer APIs, we've got more options. They're more powerful. They've got more going on. The libraries make a really big difference. Could you do SMS just as quick with Guzzle? Yes, probably. You can always just go and read. You can always just go and read the API reference on the developer portal, and that'll show you how to do it. Here it is. Send an SMS. Looks like this. And that's, if I just flip over to it, there's the API docs. You can always come and read the docs and look at how that happens. Using a library should be a helper, should improve your developer experience. But you've seen Guzzle. We've talked about the different HTTP clients that are available in your world. And honestly, if it makes more sense to you to use Guzzle, you should just do that. If you want to use a particular integration, Nexmo's a great example, and we don't have a plugin for your framework, I mean, tell me and we'll build one. But then don't be afraid to go ahead and build it anyway. We should always, always be able to build our own integrations. So don't be put off if you think, oh, well, I would need a ready-made one and there isn't, or it doesn't quite do the right thing. You've seen everything you need to see to use APIs, whether you use Guzzle, whether you use SDKs, you can bring them into your PHP project. And hopefully what I've given you today is a little bit of hands-on fun calling APIs and installing random stuff, and trying to watch me use environment variables turned out to be a mystery. But also, I've given you more information. I've given you some options. You know where to start if you want to build something. You know what your options are if you try to integrate with an existing library and you don't enjoy it. So type me some questions in the chat. Let me know how you got on, what you did, what you didn't like, whether you really would rather just watch with beer, which is always fine. Or I think Hugh might let some people into the video chat in a bit as well. So if you want to hang out more and talk, not on the recording, then that is also going to be an option. That's it from me. I think I originally posted my contact details in. You tweet at me. I'm Lorna Jane. I'm always happy to take your questions. In real life, if we ever get back to that, I'll be around at the user group. I'm here when I can be digitally, and I'm here in person as well. So with that, I'll just say thanks for having me.
Thanks, Lorna. We'll give the chat another minute or so to see if we get any questions in, because there's a delay between the two of us. If not, I'll open up the call for anyone to join if you want to hang out for a bit. When I open that up, I'll close the stream so it's not filming the chat. But please do join us and continue to talk about SDKs or working from home or whatever you want.
I'd also like to say thanks, Lorna. That was really good. Interesting.
Did you keep up? I can see Hugh code. Look, flipped windows at one point. I can see Hugh coding.
Yeah, I was going here.
Tried.
That's good. No, I think it's nice. And it was interesting to see the survey results where Symfony has the most votes, but Laravel, Laminas, and something else all also got votes. So we're a delightfully diverse community.
Usually found with these things, it could be go either way to Laravel or Symfony. It's usually one of the two that wins.
It's like Holy Wars, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. So a few people saying they got everything working. That's amazing. Well done. I just think, you know, you're at your laptop in a way that's really hard at a user group. So I'm super happy to have to take the opportunity to try and code along with you all as well. Some comments that I could put my phone number in environment variable. Yeah, as long as I don't want to text anything else, it'd be fine. Yeah, so it seems like a bunch of people keeping up. Now that's interesting. Drupal 8 and Drupal 9 both use Guzzle. Now I didn't know that. That's really good. That's why I like hanging out with you lot. I always learn something. Emma is asking if I am in the Leeds PHP Slack. Emma, I'm not. I've got Slack overload. So I was occasionally in the PHP UG Slack, but not very often. And I can't manage a Slack that's just for this. So tweet at me or email if you want something. I'm sorry. I'm not even on IRC that often now. So it's, yes.
I used to love IRC.
Yeah, I'm still there from time to time on IRC, but not that much. The PHP mentoring channel is still occasionally active, and I hang out with some other communities there, but I don't log in every day, partly because I'm on the phone half the day, so then it's hard to follow.
Sue's saying she got Guzzle working. That's great.
That's really good. Yeah. I see Marcus saying, I enjoyed that. I'm currently building a REST API, trying not to use libraries. So doing curl requests instead of Guzzle. Am I being over the top by doing it all manually when tools are available? I'd be really interesting to know why no libraries.
I always find it's quite interesting to do that kind of thing as a little test to see if you can do it. But I don't think I would ever use it for a production project. I'd always try and use a library when I can, like Guzzle.
I could go either way on this. I definitely have built APIs without frameworks because certainly a few years ago, I kind of returned a response and you're still bootstrapping your Symfony framework, even with the cache turned on, yes. So for raw performance, especially pre-PHP 7, and before the frameworks got a bit more micro, I definitely have built APIs with very little tooling around them. The thing I like about Guzzle over direct curl is Guzzle will use what's available. So if curl's available, it'll use that. Otherwise, it'll use streams. I think I would use streams if I had to pick one, though, Mark. I'm not sure I'm helping. It's all good. Yeah, we talked about open API standards. I am ignoring the person still referring to it as Swagger because I think they're probably trolling me. It's been called Open API for about 5 years, so I don't need to be understanding about that anymore as far as I'm concerned. Cool. So I don't see that many more questions coming up in the chat. If you are typing a question, type really fast. But like I say, email or Twitter are good ways to get hold of me. And if anyone wants to hang around and chat, I saw while I was talking, I saw a mention that we've got some new people who haven't used Composer before. So if anyone wants to jump on the video chat, get a bit more tuition on any of that, we'll set up your Composer or talk more about frameworks, or of course about databases. Also one of my pet topics, really enjoyed the first talk then. That would be also great.
I realise I completely forgot to ask if there are any questions, so if you want to ask me any, feel free to join the chat.
Just going to post the Slack link again if anyone wants to join that. It's fairly new, it's quite quiet at the moment, but please come and make it less quiet. If you have any ideas for things to do on it as well, just give us a shout and we'll try and do anything that seems like a good idea. It's all new, so yeah, come and join it. If you want to ask any questions about Guzzle or HTTP or anything on there, happy to try and answer where I can. And I'm sure other people will also be willing to help on there. So please come and join. Well, that then I'll probably call it a day there for the actual meetup. I'm going to post a link to the call for anyone who wants to join it. It's a Jitsi call. It works best on Chrome. If you're on Firefox, it can, or the browsers, it can cause problems for people on Chrome as well, so please just don't join on Chrome if you can, or Chromium, open source version. I'll post that there, and then I'll kill the meetup once people join. Yeah, that's on the chat now. Sounds good. I think it's quite nice that you open up the chat. We're obviously going to sit on this call and chat for a little while, so if any of our YouTube text-only chat want to be able to come and, I guess video optional, but come and join the audio chat or listen, then I really like that we do this as a group.
We have cookies.
Only for
Promises,
ourselves, though.
promises.
Streaming is on.
Okay, someone's joined, so I'm going to kill the thing.
We're obviously going to sit on this call and chat for a little while. So